Hey guys, it's Syama here, CEO of Scaling Retail. And today on our market update, I wanted to talk about some interesting stuff that I've been reading. I don't know if you guys have been listening to the New York Times Daily. I'm a big fan of that podcast. And, one of the things we've been noticing in these last few months in the last few years is kind of the concept of call out culture. Hey there, thanks for tuning in from Princeton. The concept of call out culture are now called cancel culture, right? And the notion of being canceled. And the reason why I think this is an important topic to bring up in light of fashion and retail and in our industry is that we've been seeing kind of just so much of this type of language kind of directly crossing over into how we look at the marketing values, messages, and tactics of a lot of brands and CEOs and founders. And especially in this particular kind of digital market or digital age that we're in, whereby it's so important for founders and CEOs to be front and center of their customers. The podcast is the New York Times Daily. They just had a podcast yesterday and today on cancel culture. And what I think is interesting about it, guys, is, it really mentions it. Anything you have online can essentially be found, many years later, and who you are today can show up to haunt you and to who you are tomorrow and in 10 years from now. And, it's become so important that we are conscious about the things that we say and what we do and what we believe in. And I think that's obviously super important. But aside from us as individuals, I think that it also casts a light on marketing messages and how businesses are choosing to say what it is that they take a stand for. And, normally when it comes to marketing messages, as a small brand, chances are that your business values are being purported by you, right? You're the one who's saying, these are the values. This is how we're going to be, speaking to the rest of the world. And we're going to be espousing that. And so having a much greater understanding of what your own kind of personal values are, and also aligning and understanding, hey, not only can your values shift and change over time, but also having an understanding of your values and then also your business values. And so in this notion of cancel culture and call out culture, it becomes extremely important that we look at the things that we say. And even if we are putting out messages today that seem to be different than the messages we put out a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, or even 10 years ago, being able to acknowledge that, I think, is important. I think the issue that we're seeing now when it comes to values and opinion shifting is that more often than now, people are starting to say, well, that's what I said then, and I don't, and that's who I was then, and that wasn't that big of a deal back then. But in all honesty, whether you're greenwashing your brand, whether you said something that is no longer in integrity with what your belief systems are, I think there is a onus and a responsibility towards communicating and sharing the things that you've learned and being vulnerable and open as a business and as a business owner to those kinds of changes, right? Those changes are really, really important. So cancel culture, I think that's every brand CEO founder, I think, is at risk for that, especially if you do not stand in alignment. And even though I know that breeds a lot of fear in terms of, oh my God, what about free speech? What are we not allowed to say what we believe in? Actually, you are allowed to say what you believe in. I think it's more about updating, what those things are over time and sharing kind of the realizations and the evolution of that. So that I think is important. So the next thing in terms of what's happening in the industry, obviously there have just been some dramatic shifts, but there have also been some really exciting new business ideas and new concepts that are floating around in terms of how we look at space. And so for a lot of brands out there, what I think is valuable is to reconsider the notion of what your brand means, what space means to your brand, and how you might actually be going about thinking about not just a brick and mortar space. But if that is something that is on your horizon, you're going to have a great opportunity of getting some really good leases in the next 6 to 9 months, 12 months. But also just thinking about your brand in terms of what kind of brand spaces will you occupy? So space also meaning, where else is your brand going to be showing up? One of the big questions that we always ask ourselves are, how is it, if it's a brand's job to be able to show up wherever their consumers are? Well, then how do we do a better job of showing up in those spaces that they're currently occupying? And so what I think is valuable here is to kind of figure out, in these ways in which consumers are still out and about doing things, right? So you still have consumers who are walking down the street, who are seeing bus stops, bus signs, those kinds of things. I think it's important to kind of have to kind of understand, I guess, what are the different ways in which you're going to be able to get those kinds of brand messages across to a variety of different people. So you've got billboards, right? People are still driving. You've got bus stops. People are still walking around and seeing bus stops. And then we also take a look at some of the other kind of extra touch points, right? Digital, not just digital mail, but direct mail, I think, is another interesting touch point where you can still be occupying space from a brand marketing perspective. And I'm sure there are others. So if you guys have other ideas on, where your customers are outside of just doing paid digital ads, which honestly, I think is kind of like you have to do it, but it's not everything. Just having advertisements is not really building a sustainable business, right? You have to be thinking about those other 5 to 6 other touch points. So that's where a lot of our heads have been drifting to these days. How are the other ways in which us as brands can take up space? Like, what does that look like? So that's been across my mind. And then in terms of other things that have been happening, it's been fascinating, guys, to hear about some athleisure brands that are doing phenomenal business right now. And I think that that's an interesting thing to consider. So if you are thinking of starting a brand, really ask yourself, what are the markets and where's the direction heading? How is it that we need to start to think about what are the passion points and needs of these brands? Of these consumers out there right now, right? Consumer shopping and behavior is shifting. The ways in which we think about things like work from home, being an essential worker. How does it shift when now you actually have to change the way in which you socialize and in which you work? And so it's not necessarily just going after that athleisure kind of athletic category, though it might be in some cases. But it might be asking yourself, what are the ways in which I can be looking either downstream, down market? So what are some areas in which I can disrupt? Or in terms of just introducing new price points or new product ranges, ask yourself, what are the ways in which I can move upstream, up market, right? I mean, obviously we're seeing some crazy economic fallout and will likely continue to when it comes to, like how the economy is shaking out, and we have yet to know kind of how long that's going to last. But I would say, asking yourself, who are the consumers that I want to be going after? Certainly there's a huge consumer base that's actually doing fine right now, and they're actually making money. And so while we're seeing a larger kind of chasm grow between the wealthy and the not wealthy, and we're seeing a huge kind of middle class almost get disrupted, there is going to be market share in kind of 2 of these different areas. So ask yourself, where am I kind of shifting my market energy, right? Those are some questions that we're really challenging the brands that we work with today. All right, guys, that is all for me. We'll be back on Friday with doing some of our one-on-one consultations, which are really fun. So if you're interested in having a conversation with me, talk about your business, send us an email at hello@scalingretail.com. Otherwise, guys, I will talk to you later. All right, bye.